Hello and welcome to Geekatplay Studio, and this is going to be a very cool tutorial today. We'll be working more with camera animations and linking between cameras and objects, and we'll be using an alpha plane to enhance our animation. Let's begin our scene creation with a normal terrain. This is a little bit too far out, so let's zoom back in here. And we'll make a huge terrain, and this will come back out, but make sure it's a normal one, not procedural, so it renders faster. And another terrain, and we'll just arrange these terrains so they look like a nice valley. And they'll be a little bit overlapped because we're going to be flying between them. So just put them together here any way that you want. Rotate that, move them around, and just put that in there. Use whatever imagination you want to in making this terrain here. And we're just putting together a good space to fly through. And one thing, when you start making these huge terrains, you see here we have a low pane, and that is where I want to fly, but you might have a hard time seeing your camera. So just create another layer and take all of your terrains and put them in that layer. And anytime that you want to see your camera, you can just make that layer invisible to make it easier to work with and place the camera. And then when you need to see the terrains, you just click on the eye here, and there they are. You can work with the mountains now. So let's right now go to our main camera, and one thing I want to do is add an object, something that's flying that we can track. So let's go File, Load Object, and we're going to load something from our library, and we'll just go to our robot pack, and I think I'll select this one. So we have our guy here, and I think maybe he's a little bit too big. We'll move him right in there, and we'll just scale him down there. And now let's set our render options. Render to screen, widescreen, and make it 640 by 400. And here we're going to track this machine and make the camera go ahead in front of him. A couple of the things on the terrain, I don't recommend you put anything high resolution because we're be putting motion blur on here, so the whole terrain will be blurred out. And then we'll add our alpha plane, and we've worked with those before. To add something to this guy, we'll go to our alpha plane and create a new one. And in here, I want to add some smoke, which has particles. And particles aren't in view yet, but I'm going to add something that I created in a software called Particle Illusions. So we'll just open our smoke here, and right here I have two pre-created screens here, and I've made them available on the web, so you can download these if you want to use them. And here's our color picture, and there is our alpha plane. And I want to adjust the plane proportions, and I want to reverse this. Now, some more things to tell you. We'll just move that first. The alpha plane may load some materials or other things with it, and that happens many times when something has started to be cached in the program. So just restart your machine, and that will clear your memory, and many times that resolves the problem. And also I will upload this plane for you. So let's rescale this behind a little bit, make it a little bigger, and let's make it even a little bigger back there. So right here the alpha plane is just right nicely behind our robot, and this is animated smoke, so it will look like the engine is creating the smoke behind this robot. So let's move it back a little bit. And another thing I found with alpha planes is that if you add textures to your terrains or anything, it may take the textures from those terrains, so try to work with your alpha planes before you add any materials to your terrain. So this looks good, and while we have our alpha plane selected, let's go to link it to our patrol robot. Always when you're working, especially after you've gotten something just right, remember to save your work in case of a system crash or whatever. You'll always have something fairly recently saved. Enable incorporated texture maps and compress the file and save it. And yes, we want to overwrite that. But the other times we've saved, we'll just click on that floppy disk. It will take a little bit of time to prepare the file to save it because there's about 200 or something frames of animation or smoke. And because I set incorporate textures, that is what it is doing right now, preparing those animated embedded textures. And you do want those in case you lose something. If you open it, they will all be inside there. Your file will of course be bigger, but I do like to have all of my resources stored in one place, and it makes it easier to work with that way. So we have our patrol robot, and I want to make our terrains visible. Let's zoom out. We don't need to do it on that screen. We'll just click on this one, zoom out here, and I want to take the camera and link this camera to the patrol, because that is what we're watching. So I'll move our patrol here, click on animation, and we don't need the animation wizard, and we'll make that about 8 seconds. It will be flying very fast through there. We'll take our robot and move him right to there. The one thing now that I want to do is to slightly modify that path. So when we go right here, we'll move him, and because I set it to auto keyframing, when I modify it, it automatically applies a new keyframe. And the reason I'm doing this is because I want it to look like it's following the train right in here. So let's go right here and enable our main camera view. We've already applied this path, and if we preview it here, sliding it along the timeline, it's not yet looking quite right there. Let's do some things to it. Let's go to the main camera, and I want to go to the animation toolbox. And in the animation toolbox, let's make it vibrate, and we'll use all the axes and make the frequency maybe about 10 hertz. And let's kick up the intensity, maybe up to 35, about that way. So now the robot is shaking, and this makes the camera look like it's going through turbulent air, experiencing high wind while it's moving. So that looks very nice that way. And also we can apply some blur motion, but that will take quite a bit of time. Let's go right now to our terrains. Let's set some materials for that. And you know, we can probably pick almost any materials for this. Distant fields will do here. And we'll go to the ground and we'll apply the same to the ground. So while we're here, let's load an atmosphere, and let's pick something a little more dramatic. I think we're almost ready, so let's go add a bit of a light source. And we'll put that light source there just behind the robot. So this will just light up the area around there. So it'll look like there's some heat in the engine that's glowing, and you could actually put the light inside and put it just right in there. So now it's the time we want to hide those mountains to give us a better preview of the lights and position that just right in there. And you could even increase the power if you wanted so that it will light up the inside better. And we could even add some volumetric for this one, and that would add some nice rays going out of the engine. You can see how that goes. But for this test, we'll render it without the light, and the reason we're going to do that is so the render doesn't take such a long time. So let's go ahead and do that. Start rendering this animation. One thing, when we start rendering an animation, we want to make it at least broadcast quality, so we have some motion blur automatically applied. And let's name it fly.avi and have it 24 frames per second and 640 by 400. And now these animations can take a long time to render with the blur and everything, and if you have a render farm available, that's a nice time to use that. But if you don't have one, you can just be very patient. Or another thing you can do is use a service. For example, we'll put up a link to Render Titan. It's another service that's very inexpensive, but they have high quality, so you can upload your projects from View Extreme or any other versions. That can be useful. But again, it's really just a matter of having patience, because these always take a long time to render. So let's render this animation. And here is that final render. It did take a lot of time. So you can see how we've applied those particles. The smoke in the back is an alpha plane, and the shaking looks a little bit more realistic, like it's all going through the air. Probably we want to increase the blur so it will look faster, and change how the smoke is going as well to match the turbulence. And those are things you can tweak around as you do more animations, as you understand motion. But overall, we were looking at how to use an alpha plane from particle illusions with the smoke going there in the back, and also combining objects with tracking and linking, and the animation toolbox so we could add some shaking. Thank you for watching this Geekatplay tutorial. Please come visit us on the web at www.viewtutorials.com.